Welcome to Dad Talk Today. The podcast for dads facing some of the toughest moments of their lives. We are here to walk with men through divorce, keep them connected to their kids, help them understand their rights, and work for change in family law courts. Moms, you are always welcome too. We are all about advocating for shared parenting and doing what is best for our kids. Here is your host, Eric Carroll.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am your host today, Melissa Isaak, and I'm here with Mr. Nicholas Driesen. And Nicholas, I tell you what, Nick, if there's anybody who's a shared parenting advocate, it is you. We're talking about from custody, shared parenting, false allegations, child support, publications. I mean, you reach out, you have a huge network. So I'm glad to have you on with me today. So how are you doing, Nick?
Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So we have Representative Eddie Andrews, and I think he was having some technical difficulties. So, when he gets on, we'll bring him on the show as well. But you are aware of a bill that was passed that deals with false allegations. And let me say, for a bill to be passed that deals with false allegations is extremely impressive, because I think that's the one area that we get the most resistance on, is when we're talking about dealing with false allegations or addressing false allegations. So how did you guys start with even to come up with a concept? I mean, where did this come from? Other than, I get it, we all get it, false allegations happen, but to say, you know what, we need a bill that addresses specifically this.
Yeah, well, we started our work here with Families United Action Network actually back in 2015. It was actually just this last week we had our 6th birthday. So happy birthday to all of them, everybody who's helped us to get this far. But we split into a number of different committees to focus on the different issues. We realized that not everybody who's interested in child protective service reform is necessarily interested in shared parenting or other custodial reforms. And so we kind of split everybody into where their talent and skills and interest are most suited. And then we have a drafting period, which we currently are in for 2022, of just having a few months where we discuss bills, and we play devil's advocate, and we try and poke at all the holes in to make sure that we have as strong as language as possible. So this particular bill that we're going to talk about in just a moment, which actually Representative Andrews just messaged me that he should be on in just a minute or two. Right. But that one kind of came out of nowhere. We were very glad to see it happen, and we knew we'd had several conversations with this freshman legislator, and that he understood the need for evolving family law system. And so through those conversations is how this particular bill got introduced. But we had another one that was different, attacked on a different way, where it started more with the child protective service line. With our in Iowa, if you call into child protective services with false or malicious allegations, I believe it's 4 times that they can hold you accountable. However, we have an anonymous call-in line, so even if we have an idea of who it is calling, we still can't know because of that anonymity being protected like that. So our bill was to change the call-in line from anonymous to confidential. So that way they're still protected, their anonymity is still protected, but yet the Osmundson organization would have those records, and we would be able to hold people accountable. It also would have done a legislative study onto the false allegations, because when we're looking at child protective services, in Iowa, at least, we know that the unfounded claims are over 86% of the cases. Now, that doesn't mean that it was a false claim or a malicious claim. It just means it was unfounded, something they didn't feel was going to happen again, or to posed a threat to the child. And so by enacting this legislation, it would have allowed for the study to take place so that we can find out how many are actually false or retaliatory in nature. And of those, is it, an angry neighbor that's just mad at how long you mow your grass, or is it somebody with a legitimate complaint, or is it, as you and I usually suspect, that it's somebody trying to get that upper hand leverage during a custodial division?
Yeah. Well, it's important that we're addressing this because, like you said, sometimes it doesn't necessarily false or malicious, but then there are times where reports definitely are false and malicious, and that's one of the biggest criticisms, I guess is a good word, that the family court receives, is that they kind of tend to entertain anything that comes before them, whether it's false or not. But I understand they have to, err on the side of caution. But yeah, this is difficult.
Yeah, and these days it seems like that erring on the side of caution has almost given the lies more weight than the truth in many cases. So I see we're being joined by Representative Andrews. So welcome. How are you today?
I am great. Great. Thanks for the invitation, and do apologize for our technical difficulties on this end.
I see you're still hard at work there.
I am. It's yet again, I'm the only guy here. Not that no one else is working. I just prefer to do my work here.
Okay. Well, Representative Andrews, you have not met Melissa Isaak yet. She is an attorney out of Georgia. So I'm going to turn it over to her because this is technically her show that we're on.
Yeah, so this is, I co-host with Eric Carroll, and Eric actually has a political event to be at, and and you know how politics is, right? If you want to get anything done, you have to get into politics, probably while you're working all these long hours. But I'm an attorney in Alabama and been working alongside Nick distantly for a long time. But it's really good to have you on, because when Eric said, we got this bill passed regarding false allegations, and Nick was telling me earlier that it passed relatively quickly. How do you get a bill like this passed with such little resistance? Because I would think that this would be the one topic where you would get the most resistance.
Well, a lot of questions about that. I would just say, I told a lot of the people that who elected me that I'm not going to sit here and twiddle my thumbs, and I'm not just going to sit by and just be the one of 100 people who just wait for things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And even as a freshman, which they say it's hard to get legislation passed, I've just started doing the numbers and talking to people and telling them how important this is. Getting both members of both caucuses, the Democrats and the Republicans, talking with them, talking about the significance of this. There's actually a person who actually works in the building. Obviously, for confidentiality reasons, I can't disclose that person. But boy, do they have a story. And one time we were in the chamber just like this by ourselves, and we just talked about their individual case. And it's really, it took it out of the academic stratosphere, and you saw the story unfold right there, and how valuable this would be to them and how this would change their lives. And so when you're passionate about that and you see how it affects people's lives, you have to get it done.
Yeah. It's so important to hearing what the legislators have to say, their personal stories. I know that here in Alabama, some legislators are behind it 100% because of their personal stories or stories that have happened within their families. But then there's other legislators that say, you know what, my daughter went through a horrible divorce, and this would be the absolute worst thing. So it seems like we've been with family law, with allegations, everyone draws from their own personal experiences instead of really looking at the research and looking at statistics. So if anybody knows how legislation is passed, it's you. So can you kind of walk us through? I don't know if you're getting some feedback. I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Sorry, let me turn this down a little bit. I hope that helps. I don't have any headphones on. I'm sorry.
So can you kind of walk us through this legislation when you're dealing with families and allegations? How much of it is emotion and personal experiences, and how much of it is statistics and research?
Well, I have seen this firsthand in several families. Part of my background, I'm in ministry, and so you see a lot of family situations on both sides, good and bad, and a lot of places where I've been injected into a family situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen this firsthand where this actually takes place. And so I wasn't really coming from no one had to tell me about this. And that was one of the things that when I was elected, I just said, you know what, we need to do all of these 17 promises that I made that I said I would do. and that was one of them. And we were lucky, and I hate to use that word lucky, but we fought to get this done fairly rapidly. So that's kind of where my background was, just seeing families affected firsthand.
Okay. Alrighty.
Now,
So,
Representative Andrews, not everybody's from Iowa and knows what this bill does exactly, and I know our team did have a couple questions as well, but could you just kind of break down what this bill does and is meant to do?
Okay, I'm assuming you're talking about 19, right?
No, HF 821, the false allegations bill.
And I do apologize. The numbers drive me crazy.
Especially when they change multiple times.
They do change. It started at, any rate, 774 or something like that.
I believe that was the parental rights bill, and we did want to circle back to that one as well, because Eddie has been a great supporter of families and family law reform, and so we were very lucky to have him here in Iowa. But yeah, we were talking about HF 821, which is the bill for false allegations, the one that has been signed into law by the governor. So congratulations!
Yay!
Well done.
Well, I can tell you, the funny thing is, it's a very powerful law, but it's very short. I think it's the shortest law, certainly, that I've submitted. It really just says that if anyone prevents or presents any false information, you can go after them, especially if it's in a legal fashion. It could even be law enforcement. It could be a 911. It could be, you tattletelling on someone, and then they discover that this is false information.
Okay, that was one of our questions, was the law enforcement authority there. So would that also apply to social workers or any other government actors?
It would apply to any individual who presents false information.
Okay.
So it could be an individual acting on behalf of an agency.
In any capacity.
Okay.
Now, there is some clarification that we're trying to make with the so-called Black the Blue bill. There's a provision in there that perhaps you guys are aware of that grants qualified immunity. And the way it is written, this is one of the reasons I was one of several people who did not vote for that, even though I like many of the provisions in the bill. But it has a qualified immunity. But the way it's written, it literally is for every municipal worker and every state worker, which is exactly what we don't want to do. And it's certainly not a Back the Blue division of the bill. And so we're making sure that works in those scenarios as well.
That was actually going to be one of our other questions there. Now, how does this apply differently than an abuse of civil claims?
You know what? I may not be the right person for that one. Maybe I should have brought one of my staff members with me. We talked about that, and I was satisfied with their answer, but I don't know if I could repeat that one.
Okay. Do you feel that the evidentiary standard is high enough? Can I ask why we weren't pushing for a clear and convincing evidence, much like fraud, since that's essentially what this is?
Well, this is, as they say, baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. This is just one piece of several portions of our legislation that are coming forth.
Yeah, I know that's one thing I preach to our team quite a bit, is that there is a lot more power in baby steps than maybe steps. And that we, as long as we are taking those steps forward, we have more toehold to go back in and to more to work with than what we had before.
Right. I've seen that both on the negative and the positive. One of the other ones that I'm working on, we're literally stuck on one word, and we, unless a miracle happens in the next week, that won't advance this session. We're going to have to wait till January. And it's only because we refuse to give up on what I thought was the most important word. And they wanted it out. We wanted it, or vice versa. We wanted it out. They wanted it in. And it took the power of the entire law out. And so if we had left that in, the theory is that we could have been more We could have gone back and later and changed it, but so yes, there is power in baby steps and getting things in law and changing them if you need to later on.
Yeah, but we also got to be careful of that appeasement to just, we did something for you, now we don't need to go back and do anything. We need to make sure that people always know that there's more work to be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. There's a big difference between, we have to have really good discernment, I think, in these bills, because you can get a bill passed, and if the wording isn't correct, you can actually do more harm than good. So many states, especially with the shared parenting bills, have had to weigh between, okay, we're going to let this bill die, or we have to substantially agree to change the bill to where it doesn't have its intended effect. So, it's good that you're talking about that discernment, because people have to understand that when they're involved in legislation. So let me ask you this. So you're saying, do the allegations have to be provably false to fall under this bill? What if something is unfounded versus false? And can you talk about the difference between the two?
Well, in this scenario, it says knowingly. So it has to be, you have to show that they knew that the information that they provided was false.
Okay. All right.
So we were looking for, back to the phrase of baby steps, we were looking for stronger language the first time around. And to your point earlier, we faced opposition. What is this measure? What is this standard versus this standard? And this was a good first step that we can modify later on. But as of right now, they have to know.
All right. So they have to know. It's not something they knew or should have reasonably known. You have to prove that they, without a doubt, knew.
Right. And I've seen, there was another member here, again, I won't share their name or their story, but where their ex was providing false information about them. And boy, was this a way that they could use, a tool that they can use, whether or not they actually use it, but sometimes even the threat of using it can stop behavior.
So this is a civil matter, a civil law, I think, correct? Yes. All right. So can someone who is trying to exercise their rights under this law or bring an action under this law, are they entitled to a jury trial, or is this something that has to be done in front of a judge, just a judge?
It would go along with the standard protocols for civil suits. So it wouldn't change anything there. Okay,
very good. So it's really up to maybe a jury of their peers to determine if they knew or not.
Correct.
Okay, that's very good. And I'm a huge fan of the jury system, because I think if we took every divorce case in front of a jury versus a bench trial, I think 90% of the cases would be a different outcome. Because I think we all have this here in Alabama. We have bench trials, and so we go in front of the same judges, and the judges just think a certain way. And we have older judges who probably need to get off the bench, but they don't care about adultery. They don't care about other things, where I think a jury would care about fault. So it's good that you could bring this in front of a jury, because I think you'd have a better outcome if a jury should say, you know what? No, I think you did know, versus a judge who says, you know what? I'm kind of annoyed with this case, because we all know that happens. Judges do that.
Sure. Well, here in Iowa, we even had a case where a judge admitted to doing 200 cases of ghostwriting, where he would just let one of the attorneys write the decision and he'd sign his name off on it. Mm-hmm. And he was retired when he admitted it. So they did an investigation. Even though he admitted to 200 times, the state decided it was only 13. But they went back, and I don't know how many of those, at least 3 of those decisions have been reversed already. But those families' lives have severely been damaged already, despite the overturning of it. The damage has been done.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you too. So it's a civil matter. So if there's false allegations that arise within a domestic relations case, the adjudication of whether they knew or not, would that have to be done in a separate matter, or could that be done in the same case? And I bring this up for this reason, is because there's laws against perjury, for instance. But if we litigate the perjury within the divorce case and then try to bring a separate matter later, the courts say, no, this is res judicata. This has already been heard. So is there a way that someone could preserve their rights to bring an action under this new bill if
Oh boy.
it's been brought up in a domestic relations case?
Oh boy, that's the question for one of my family attorney
Okay.
staff members. I do apologize. I don't know the answer to that one. Great question though.
That's okay. So, but this bill is family law related, is criminal related. If your neighbor files a trespass against you and you can prove that you indeed did not go out there and they knew you weren't, it applies across the board.
Yes, and we've seen this for, when we got this through, you would not believe the amount of emails and Facebook direct messaging that we got that said, you know what, this would have helped me when XYZ happened. This would have helped me when such and such happened. And they're glad that even though they cannot be helped, that other families going forward can be helped.
Was there nothing in place to address false allegations?
Not in this capacity. So this adds the civil component to it.
Well, I hope that definitely helps you to feel good and worthwhile that you're doing the people's work up there. And it's not just a bill to decide what color the road lines are going to be or something like that, that it's something meaningful that really will affect the day-to-day life of people.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, because we, just between you two and whoever else is listening, there are a number of bills that you look at, you just kind of look around the room and you say, why are we passing this? I mean, this affects 2 people in Iowa, or, we just spent a day on something that's, it doesn't matter if it's red or blue, who cares? But this will affect families in a positive way. So it feels really good to be able to help families.
It seems like sometimes the legislation that is the most ridiculous and will affect the least amount of people are the easiest ones to get through, and the ones that make the most amount of sense have the most amount of resistance. Would you agree with that?
Very true. Very true. I have seen 2 pieces of legislation, 2 that I've introduced, that have just faced absolutely what I feel like is almost insane amount of opposition, sometimes in a logic-free zone. It just makes no sense. And even when you address all of the issues that they say they're concerned about, they just say, yeah, but I still don't like it.
Go ahead.
We have to get past that.
Yeah. It seems anytime we deal with family law, with custody specifically, or false allegations, there's so many other groups that come forward and oppose, for instance, a presumption, an equal, shared parenting presumption. What types of resistance are you seeing there with those types of bills?
Well, in the parental rights bill, we did make some language changes, very minor ones in the Senate version. It's not on the floor yet, but it's in draft. And one of them, it says, initially it said something like marital status and divorce, doesn't change it. And what we added was marital status or divorce alone doesn't change that, because just because you're separated from that person does not mean you're separated from your child, or that your rights as a father or a mother should be any less just because you're not together. So we did make some minor changes to strengthen that bond.
Yeah, and for those that are listening, that one would be House File 819, which is a different bill that he had drafted. It's a parental rights bill. That one, we're hoping to have some other conversations with him and some of the members in the Senate, as it is still alive, but it will not advance from what we see this year. It's been put on the unfinished business list. So in theory, there shouldn't need to be any repeating of the House next year. We can just advance in the Senate. But due to the fact that we do see that there will probably be some changing in the bill language, hopefully in what section of the code it's in as well, that then it would go back over to the House again for another floor vote to approve the whatever amendments might happen next year. But that bill is, again, still alive and well. It just will not be heard until next session.
Oh, well stated. And thanks for the numbering system, because as you
it took me so many years to figure it out, and every time I think I got it, then something, I'm like, oh wait, I can't tell what's happening anymore.
Yes, but the underlying assumption is, yes, there are lots of opposition for things that there should be opposition for. Telling the truth. How about that? If you lie on somebody publicly, that hurts their case. Well, why shouldn't you be able to be sued, or someone should be able to sue you? Or parental rights being a fundamental right. How is that? How is that even controversial?
Well, so I have a question about that. So parental rights is a fundamental constitutional right. It's the law of the land. It has been the law of the land. Who is it that's giving resistance to what is already there? Who is it?
Boy. Well, the ABA is one. There's a subset of lawyers who are opposed to that.
Yeah. When you say the ABA, how does the ABA interfere in legislation in your state?
Well, so it's you no doubt understand that the floor manager system. So when it comes back to the House, the floor manager really controls whether the bill pauses, dies, or advances, right? So even though it passed the House 94-0, once the ABA got involved, there's one person who was hesitant to move it forward, and literally, I think the only person who's hesitant about that is the floor manager, and so that's it's funny that one person can literally stop the show. But
we had the same floor manager on a different bill that was essentially going for the same thing of getting as equal rights for parents, and seemed like a good supporter last year, and then all of a sudden full breaks this year.
Yes, and so that's why their weight means so much in this case, where we don't really need their input, but we do to satisfy the floor manager.
Now,
So
how do
there
we
you go.
get past something like that? Because again, we are experiencing that hurdle with other bills. There's one bill particularly, the shared parenting bill for a rebuttable presumption of shared parenting with clear and convincing evidence. It's had 18 votes over the years now. Never, ever failed a vote. It is one of the most popular bills statewide. When polled, it makes sense. And one person is repetitively able to stop it every year. It's going to change too. But this is, again, it's a waste of taxpayer time and money to keep debating the same thing over and over that is continuously agreed, just for one person to have that capability to stand in the way and block it for everybody. And how do we overcome that when we're trying to be as polite as possible, never want to tear anybody down or attack anybody? Sure. But these things get very frustrating when we know we have the support needed, but just one person can get in the way and stop it.
Good point. And first of all, before I even say anything else, let me just make sure that I am not seen in any way tearing them down on a personal level, even though we disagree, right? And
that's a big thing that a lot of people want to go straight for that attack. Yeah. And that's not going to help us to build bridges and to get to that tomorrow we're looking for. And so we're not about that either.
Right. Great guy. We disagree on this. Well, I'm looking at all of my law books right in front of me. I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV, but I guarantee you that in the last 6 weeks or so that it passed the House, I have looked at more case law, maybe than ever. No, definitely more than I ever have in all my years prior to this. And I've looked at similar legislation in Oklahoma, similar legislation in Arizona and Pennsylvania, and read court cases, mainly to understand their concerns. And quite honestly, I think they've all been alleviated. And it's one of those situations where there's one other person that they're listening to, that yet another person that has some weight with them, and they're just not moving forward until that person is satisfied, which is potentially never. And so we just have to get better. I think that's the ultimate answer. Just have to employ the legal system, the lawyers like Melissa and other people who have expertise, who can provide answers that satisfy them.
So a lot of our listeners and followers, I mean, and us to some extent, we're convinced that these shared parenting bills won't pass because of the Title IV money that the states receive. Of course, if there's a shared parenting bill, child support goes down and Title IV, D funds go down to the states. How much does Title IV factor in with the lawmakers who just keep killing our bills every year?
So I can only say with speculation. I really don't have any concrete evidence. I've heard that before, but I can't really comment on that until I have better information on that. But it is a concern shared by many.
So after first year being in office, I'm sure that you have many takeaways.
Yes, I do.
People watch TV shows and everything else, so I guess they get that image in their mind that it's all just about backroom dealings and money's exchanging hands. And after personally being up there, I see that it's a lot more about grassroots efforts and simply having conversations. But do you feel that there are those backroom conversations and money exchanges that could get in the way and give some of these people those reasons to have those loud voices against or in favor of a bill that would make sense to be, that just makes sense, but all of a sudden they're a loud voice for or against?
Well, first of all, let me just echo on the first point. Grassroots is the real winner. It really does help when people call their legislators. I prefer that you get a hold of them before you need them. Have a conversation, have a coffee, send an email. Hey, how are you doing? What do you think about this? Just ask questions, sometimes even before you need a specific point of legislation. But when you do have a point of the point that's good for a piece of legislation, please don't assume that person knows what you're talking about. I won't say get in their face, but you know what I mean? You have to be, get them on the phone, send emails, come down to the Capitol building if you're able to, and really talk to that person. Because for me, it probably took me maybe 6 weeks to stop drinking out of the fire hose full blast. There's just so much to learn. And so when I'm on my 5 committees, I'm working on my own pieces of legislation. I'm working on other pieces of legislation. I'm the subcommittee chair on something that I've never even heard of 2 weeks before that. And so you kind of have to think of it as defending someone else's dissertation. You have to become a semi-expert on something in a week and ask questions. And so with all that going on, you have a piece of legislation that might be important to you, but it's just not on your mind. Mm-hmm. And when people say, hey, Eddie, you need to vote for this, or have you seen this? And you look at the calendar and say, oh my goodness, this is coming up in a week. Let me research this and get my group together or talk to other legislators about this. So there's nothing as powerful as actually directly talking with the legislator.
Yeah, and actually, Melissa and I were talking about that before this meeting, about that power of getting in front of them and how it's usually best actually to do so before sessions. So, because when you're at the Capitol, you got there on an easy year. Usually it's elbow to elbow in that rotunda, but due to COVID, there was a lot less commotion this year. But even still, it was go, 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 go. And as you mentioned, even something that's important to you, when you have so many people trying to get your attention and so many bills running that you have to learn about, it's very easy to get distracted, and you can have the best conversation and have every pure intention to go do what you're about to do. But by the time you make it back to your desk, you've had another 100 conversations and you're still human and it just slips your mind. So not giving that as a blanket excuse for things not getting done, but I'm saying it's something that people just don't realize, that you're a legislator, not an expert on every single issue that comes your way. And so you have to rely on those that you trust, whether it be your caucus or your friends, your personal experience. But back to that original question, what type of interaction and effect does the lobbyist really come into play with that?
Well, I think lobbyists can add valuable information. We don't always agree, but it's nice to to know the other side. And usually when I talk to a lobbyist about a certain situation or a certain topic or a certain bill, I usually ask them what's the opposite side of this? What's the opposition saying to this? And usually, if they're a good lobbyist, I've learned that they just state the opposite case and why people would be for or against it. So, to me, I look at them as just one piece of education. Certainly not all of the education. Ultimately, you need to read the bill and understand it yourself, and then talk to your staff members. By the way, we have a great staff who I sit down and I will go and like I did a couple of days ago, and just sat down with a half an hour and went over all the bullet points of a certain bill and thanked them for their time. There was a group of them there that was giving me information and said, well, I will read the rest tonight. But we went over 2 pages of bullet points. So it was a huge bill, one of the one that's coming up. And maybe 30 bullet points. And I still had probably another 40 pages to read, but it was good to get their overview.
I think that's a good point you're making. We said earlier that this dealing with family issues really largely is a grassroots movement. And I'm very impressed also that you said you've read the law and case law, because I think as legislators, I think one of the biggest things you have to make sure is that what you're doing is constitutional, or, what does the law say about this? And so, so this is a two-pronged question. First is, do you find that most legislators are educated in the law and what the law requires, in the specific area for the bill they're passing? And then two, what advice would you give to people who really, these parents are their own lobbyists? What advice would you give them when they're talking to legislators?
The last part, could you say that? Did you say to parents?
Yeah, to parents, because really parents sometimes are their own lobbyists. They speak on their own behalf, and sometimes they get too emotional going through their own personal cases. But those two questions, like, are the lawmakers really educated in what is constitutional, what the law is, and then what advice would you give to parents on how to communicate?
Oh, boy. I would hope so. I'm just going to say I hope so, but I have seen a couple of examples of where I've seen laws passed where people are saying, boy, I don't really understand this. I'm going to see how Bob, for example, votes, because I trust their judgment on this. I have seen a couple of cases like that where they just are completely clueless and they just, well, I like how Bob usually thinks, so I'm just going to vote for like Bob.
Yeah, do legislators research as you do?
I'm sorry?
Do legislators really do as much research as you do? It seems like you're an anomaly.
I can't speak for them, but I told people, and I meant this, that they're not going to find anybody that's working harder than me.
Right.
And you really hit a nerve earlier when you said there's a lot to learn. And, you see my, this is just one of the books here, and you got yellow color coded things all over the place. And that's just one of several. Mm-hmm. And you just have to know this, and there is a learning curve, but I would like to think that most lawmakers learn enough. There is a lot of confidence, though. I have seen that where I kind of joked about it before, but there's a lot of trust on certain issues with other people who are experts in that area. And then the second portion is, yes, parents, oh my goodness, have to be their own lobbyists. And we've seen that. I'm sure you guys have seen that many, many times where mom or dad will come down and say, hey, I'd like to talk to legislator A, and just have a conversation about, this is my story, this is what's going on, I'd like your support in this area. We saw that even this past week where we saw one, it wasn't this area, but it was, Kimberly Gleason, and the where she almost single-handedly revived 2 bills in both the House and the Senate with legislative help. And she's a one woman person. She's not even a lobbyist. She just is a force that has determined to be down here and meet every legislator that can help her. And we were able to do that. So it's those kinds of examples are valuable because it just tells you that parents can make things happen just lobbying for yourself.
Do you recommend that they discuss their personal stories? Do you recommend they bring in case law to show the legislators? What should they do to be the most effective?
As whatever works for them. I mean, that's the short answer for me. I don't think in this case there was any case law that was just brought out. It was like, hey, this is my story. This is what happened. This is what I want to happen to protect other people, to not have to go through and endure what I did. And so we took laws that had died, so to speak, and revived them. And so anything that any person, any individual, any mom, any dad, any just a standard citizen can do to tell why you need it. And people remember stories. And so, and there's no testimony like your own. You can't argue with that. This happened to you, or this was my experience. And when you're talking with a lawmaker, that's what people really want to hear. This is your testimony, and is it going to help anyone else if we do X, Y, Z?
How effective are rallies and committee meetings for parents come and tell their stories? Because we've seen recently.
We're getting some bad feedback from you there.
Yeah. I think it's on my. Yeah, I'm just getting some feedback.
Much better.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we've seen recently where we've seen hundreds of parents go to the state house where they tell their stories. They testify hours and hours and hours, sometimes into the night, and yet it doesn't matter. So just, some parents have said it doesn't matter. They have their minds made up before we even get there. They have their minds made up about what they're going to do with these parenting bills before a story is told. What's your experience with that? And what do you tell these parents who show up in droves and demand change in a respectful way, tell their stories, but yet year after year, nothing changes?
Well, first of all, I would say keep trying. Do not give up. Do not give up. And that is the absolute phrase that I don't like to hear. I've never been a person that's given up. I mean, but what you don't really want to hear is, well, we didn't get it done this time. Let's wait till next year. I mean, who wants to hear that phrase? I didn't want to hear that. And I've only been here a year. I'm 17, 18 weeks into this. And I don't even want to hear that. Yeah. When people say, well, it's okay, Eddie, you got more than the previous person that was in the office in 2 years done. You've got more in the first few weeks, but you want to win every time. And the only thing I can say is just keep trying, maybe add some twist to the legislation, maybe find out why. Have a meeting with all the people on that committee, for instance.
Okay.
The correct answer we were looking for was never fear. Eddie's here now. He's already done fabulous on year 1 for a freshman legislator. Again, I was very lucky to have you.
It's an honor. But yeah, you just have to keep back up and do it again, and maybe try a few tweaks and get better at it.
All right, Eddie. So these parents out there who are watching, who are in Iowa, who have fell victim to false allegations, when does this bill take effect and what do they need to do?
It is effective as of the 10th of this month. It's effective immediately upon signing. It was signed 5 days ago. So, boom.
And did you get one of those nice little pens, or did you not get one of those for that?
I have some right here.
Oh, wonderful.
All right.
Yes, it's an honor.
So will you be available to talk to people maybe in other states who want to start some sort of similar legislation? Because to my knowledge, this is the first actual false allegations bill.
Well, we aim to please.
Thank you
So
very much.
yes, I would be happy to talk with anyone and engage them from any state.
All righty.
So before we let you off, guys, which I can tell we're about to wrap up. So after first year, what would you say are some of the biggest takeaways, and how has it changed you as you've learned this process?
Boy, I don't think you can be the same after a year of talking to 20,000 people and listening to during the campaign, that is, and just hearing from everyone, and then coming down here and knowing how legislation can really help people and affect lives. I don't think you can be the same. I think I know certainly that I've grown as a person, and I hope to be a you know what? I've told people this, and that of all these 100 legislators, I want to be the absolute best representative of our area. And that sounds a little like, what are you talking about, dude? But I really do want to represent these people well. And that's my biggest takeaway, that I'm honored to serve and just want to do the best to represent them and help families.
Well, you're doing off to a great start, but don't let it go to your head. Please stay grounded and stay in touch. We like the direction you're going so far. So thank you.
I think you've done more than any legislator as far as educating yourself and reading the law, more than any lawmaker I've ever spoken with. So I'm very impressed with you there. Much so.
Well, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Representative Andrews, how can our listeners friend you, follow you, find you? How can they get a hold of you, or just follow what you're doing?
Sure. Go to Facebook, and it's Eddie for Iowa. Eddie #4 Iowa. That's our page. Please like that page. You can also friend me on my regular page, Eddie Andrews. But Instagram, it's Eddie Andrews Rocks. Sorry, that was just my personal one. And then on Twitter, it's just Eddie Andrews. If you're into web stuff, just Eddie4Iowa.com or just EddieAndrews.com, either one of those. And phone number is 515-800-IOWA, 515-800-4692. Call me, text me anytime.
All righty. And Mr. Nicholas Dreesen, how can they get a hold of you and follow the work that you're doing there in Iowa?
Yes, and thank you again, Melissa, and all of Dad Talk Today listeners. First, want to announce that we also are about a month away from rolling out Fawn Talk, which will be happening on every Saturday night. And so we're just going to continue to do just like we did here, just have a conversation with different people. Those who wish to follow us can look us up on Facebook at Families United Action Network, all spelled out. And you can also go to our website of familiesunite.org.
Wonderful. All righty. Thank you again, Representative Eddie Andrews. Thank you, Nick. I'm sure we'll speak again soon. You're doing wonderful work and hope to have you on again.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We are fighting for the rights of parents worldwide. If you want to help support our podcast and for us to continue this mission, please join us at patreon.com/dadtalktoday. You will find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, CloutHub, Parler, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, the podcast app, Google, Apple Podcasts. We're a little bit of everywhere. And guys, every time you like and subscribe, you help us continue this mission. Thank you, and we will see you next time.